And welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Tim Staples, our guest this hour, and it's open forum, 888-318-7884. Second hour, we'll do open forum as well, but Jim Blackburn will join us as our guest, so your calls are welcome. 888-318-7884. I was just, as we're getting ready to go on the air, learning from Tim how to get out of jury duty.
That's right. All you got to do is say you're a Catholic evangelist. They literally laugh at you as they say, you can go now.
Yeah.
That actually happened to me. I'm serious. It was 25
Isn't that
years
funny?
ago.
Yeah. I wonder what about Catholic evangelists just makes them think, we don't want you on the jury. I wonder.
Yeah, I think evangelist, Christianity, all that stuff. We don't want somebody that thinks for themselves. Sorry, get out of here.
Yeah.
We want people we can program.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm going to tell them next time. I'm going to say I'm an easily programmed radio host. They'll be like, radio host? That's one of the dumbest kinds of people in the world. 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. If you have a question about the Catholic faith, this hour is for you. You are very welcome here, whether you're Catholic or not. Just pick up the phone and call. Ask whatever you like about the Catholic faith. 888-318-7884. We are short call screener, so I might just play caller roulette in a little bit and just let them on and see what they say. But we are,
Amen, brother.
well, at least we got Darren screened one call for us, Tom in Omaha. So I think I can go to Tom. Yeah, all right. We'll figure out who's going to answer the phones in a minute here. But Tom in Omaha. In the meantime, you are up. Tom, go ahead with your question for Tim.
Hello, Tom. Do we have Tom?
I don't know if we have Tom. Do we have?
Did you push the wrong button again?
I probably did. Tom, are you there with us? Oh, he's on line 2. Oh, I gotcha. Okay, we are.
For once, it wasn't your fault, Si.
You don't have to put the "for once" on the front of it, but that's true. All right, Tom, are you there with us? We want to do a radio program.
I'm here.
I'm so happy you're here,
I'm
Tom.
here.
You can't even believe how happy I am. Go ahead with your question for Tim.
Okay, here's my question. The last time you spoke a couple days ago, you were talking about taking God's name in vain, a very
Yes.
relevant topic.
Yes.
And you said that in addition to the usual obvious things are giving approval to sins in God's name. And you mentioned 2 or 3 homosexual sins.
Yes.
And my question is this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why only homosexual sins? We've got couples living in fornication before they get married. We've got married people use 90% or more using artificial birth control. We have divorce. We have annulments for the asking and all this and that.
Right.
You never mentioned those.
Well, Tom.
So it leads me to believe that there's kind of an animus about homosexuals. I mean, why only their sins are being mentioned?
Right. Well, as you already said, I didn't just mention homosexual sin. I also mentioned transgender. And in the context of the second commandment, I was talking about using the Lord's name in vain. That is, presenting this as if it was Catholic teaching at a Catholic university or a Catholic wearing a red hat. I mentioned, as well as, you know, we could talk about Father Timothy Radcliffe or Cardinal, Hilaric, or others. I could have named names, but I didn't name any names. Hey, but I just did.
Now you did, but
now I did. And I guess, Tom, the reason is, number one, this is an hour broadcast, so we can't name every sin. But number two, it's because these are the hot topics. This is what's happening right now. We have Catholics in high places that are teaching things like the blessing of homosexual marriages being possibly licit, which is in direct defiance of Scripture, tradition, magisterium, and the Vatican. And so this is a hot topic right now. Now, of course, we have Catholics sinning all kinds of sins. But I wasn't talking about that per se. I was talking about presenting these kinds of sins as if they are Catholic teaching. And that is directly violating the second commandment because you're taking the Lord's name in vain. Why? Because the Catholic Church is Jesus Christ on this earth. the Jesus Christ extended into the world. And so when you claim that the church is saying these things, you're saying Jesus is saying these things, and that is blasphemy. Does that make sense?
Up to a point, but when you have 90% of the Catholic, fertile, married, practicing Catholics using artificial birth control, your audience, which is mainly Catholics, it seems to me that's very relevant to them.
Yeah, but not
And
to
certainly
the yes.
outranks using picking on homosexuals.
Hey, Tom,
Not
I
that
think
the
you missed the point.
homosexual sins are
Yeah.
not that homosexual sins aren't important,
Right.
but
right.
I mean it goes way beyond that in the annulments. and all
Okay,
that.
Yeah,
but Tom, hang on just a second, because I think you missed the point. I agree with you in what you're saying here, and if you've listened to me more than a few minutes, you've heard me, because I respond to all of the above, but I think you're failing to see what I was actually answering. I was answering the question about the second commandment. This was not a question about what, as you say, a large percentage of Catholics are doing. This is about leaders of the church teaching particular sins to be justifiable. And that I was responding to in a specific way. Now, if somebody else calls in and asks about contraception or any other thing, I will respond and say, guess what? That is grave sin, and that's a definitive teaching of the church. Catholics are not free to dissent on that, and of course I will respond to that. But Tom, I think you're misrepresenting what I was doing. I was not singling out homosexual sin because I didn't only mention homosexual sin, because I specifically mentioned transgender as well, and other sins in the context of any time you have, and I distinctly remember at the end I said, any time you have a Catholic, whether he's wearing a red hat or any other hat, or whether he's teaching at a Catholic university, that's where you're taking the Lord's name in vain, and it becomes a specific violation of the second commandment. And that was the question I was answering. But I appreciate your call, Tom. God bless you.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks very much. Darren doing two jobs right now. You're saying no, not doing two jobs? Why are we off the air, Darren? Including one of those jobs, he's screening the calls. So we go now to San Pablo, California. Richard in San Pablo. Richard, you there with us?
Yes, I am. I
Yes.
just wanted to find out. A set of parents are trying to complete, or I guess make happy their parents, and however the parents have a child that they just want to go through the motions and baptize the child. And so one of the grandparents had posed a question, whether it's even worth baptizing the child if the parents themselves have no intention of practicing the faith.
Right.
And so that was a good question I was posing. And I didn't know what to recommend, so I wanted to get your take on it.
Sure. Well, yeah, actually, in order for a pastor to baptize a baby, there has to be a reasonable there has to be a reason for that pastor to believe that the child will be raised Catholic. Now, it doesn't mean that the both parents have to be PhDs in theology and pass a test for a PhD. No, but it's a reasonable sort of statement that the church makes. Is this child going to be raised Catholic? And generally speaking, if they're bringing the child to be baptized, generally the answer is yes to that question. So this is not one of these things where 50% of people coming to baptize their kids have no intention of raising the kid Catholic. I mean, generally speaking, they do. But it can be a problem, and pastors do. I remember my spiritual director in the seminary had to turn someone down for that very reason. And it ended up, though, sparking a conversation that ended up in the allowing the child to be baptized because the parents made a commitment. So Yeah. So generally speaking, yes, there has to be reason to believe that the child will be raised Catholic, raised in the faith, before a pastor should baptize that child. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you very much.
All
Richard,
right, brother.
Thanks very, very much. That brings us right up to our first break. 2 lines open right now. It's open forum. Tim Staples, our guest this hour. 888-318-7884. Right back with you.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
I don't like looking back. I prefer to look forward and keep moving forward. There's plenty to cover. I do a lot of research and try to dig out the bits and pieces of a life or an agenda that people don't want to talk about.
The World Over with Raymond Arroyo. Tonight, 8 Eastern on EWTN Radio and Television.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Tim Staples is our guest. And 2 lines are open, 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. We're going to New Mexico next. Andres in New Mexico. Andres, are you there with us?
Yes, sir. I sure am.
All right. Great, Andres. Thank you very much. Go ahead with your question for Tim.
Yes, my question, thank you. First of all, thank you for taking my call, and hello to all the audience and everybody that's out there listening. And anyway, my question is on the papacy, him being pretty much in charge, I guess, of the Catholic Church, and his stand on agreeing with President Biden on, he says, well, you're okay believing on, the abortion issue and so forth. And I mean, I want to see what your take is on that. And then I stand in judgment of no one, but in the gay marriage issue, I know it's a touchy subject, but given the time and age that we're at, I don't know. I thought the Catholic Church would be more strict. I used to see a lot of bumper stickers years ago, especially here in New Mexico, because it's a highly concentrated Catholic state. You can't be both. You can't be Catholic and pro-choice.
Amen.
It's like a no-no, but I guess, everything has kind of mellowed out and changing. But like you said, the second commandment or third commandment and the first, all the commandments, they're, they're pretty firm on what is and what isn't,
the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill. Got to add that one in.
Yeah.
Well, Andres, let me jump in here because I'm afraid you're misinformed, my friend, about Pope Francis. Pope Francis has been one of the strongest voices of any pope. In fact, I have never heard of any pope saying that to have an abortion is akin to hiring a hitman to take care of a problem. I mean, Pope Francis tends to be incredibly blunt when he says that abortion is a sin. And in fact, with regard to President Biden, the Pope personally came out and said President Biden's position on abortion is incoherent, and he needs to talk to his bishop or his pastor to straighten him out, because a baby is a baby. So that is Pope Francis. He has been very, very strong against abortion, and you see it in numerous of his apostolic exhortations, his encyclicals. I mean, I think immediately of Laudato Si and how he brought in the whole ecological thing with, the throwaway culture that we have, and we throw away that which is inconvenient. We throw away babies in abortion. And this is absolutely blasphemy. And so Pope Francis is, now when I say he's as strong as any pope. I'm talking about the blunt nature of his language. My goodness, a hitman, right?
Right.
And it's absolutely correct.
Yep.
But some say, that's a little bit too blunt, Your Holiness. Are you saying that these people are like hitmen? Yes.
That is what he's saying.
That is what he's saying. All right. But now, as far as gay marriage, I mean, just the other day, he did an interview and he made it very clear. He said that when we talk about homosexual acts, it's not a crime, and he's correct there, but it's a sin, right? And in fact, when the question of the blessing of homosexual marriages came up, the Pope gave a private audience to the prefect of the DDF, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, and a statement was issued. The church cannot bless these so-called unions because the church cannot bless sin. So the Pope has on numerous occasions from his own lips through the CDF and his own documents and what he has written said that homosexual acts are sins. So I don't know how that gets translated into he's in favor. No, not at all. Now, granted, there is a question about whether we should refuse communion to people who are, dissenters on, for example, abortion. And that's been a battle that's gone on in the United States. And Pope Francis has stated his position that's in line with Pope Benedict XVI and Pope John Paul the Great and Pope Paul VI and every pope that I know of in the last several hundred years that believes that this is a matter that must be decided by each Catholic before they receive communion. And that's in agreement. By the way, I happen to personally be a fan of can I go on record saying I'm a fan of Canon 915. I believe it should be more widely employed. But I'm not the Pope, and I'm not a bishop, and I recognize both sides. I believe a sin that is as absolutely heinous as abortion, when people publicly promote it, vote for it, and such. I believe, I agree with the good Archbishop up in San Francisco who refused Nancy Pelosi. I believe it should be a lot wider than just one politician. I think all 100 of them that are Catholics going to Mass on Sunday should be refused. But the point is, Pope Francis makes a valid point that unless we have unanimity on this point, it looks like political football. Why this one person? What about the other 100? What about... And so, the Pauline principle becomes very important here. What does St. Paul say in 1 Corinthians 11, 27 through 29? If anyone eats this bread or drinks the cup of the Lord unworthily, he shall be guilty of the body and blood of the Lord. Therefore, let each man examine himself and so receive, says St. Paul. So there is a very strong tradition in our church that goes all the way back to St. Paul that says, look, what you do is you warn people, you proclaim the gospel. You say, look, if you receive the Eucharist, when you are in mortal sin, you're committing the sin of sacrilege. And in fact, Paul goes on in verse 30, after he warns, if you eat this bread or drink the cup unworthily, you eat, in fact, go down to verse 29, you eat and drink damnation to yourself. And then he says, for this cause, many of you are sick and some have died. Wow. But notice what Paul didn't do. He didn't say, therefore, everybody in Corinth, refuse these people. Refuse these people. No, he warns them. If you receive unworthily, you're committing sin. You can even physically die as well as spiritually die. And so no matter where people are in their opinion of whether we should refuse communion or not, what we all need to do in imitation of our Holy Father, Pope Francis, and all the popes is proclaim the gospel, proclaim the truth that any politician who publicly votes for, as President Biden and Nancy Pelosi and on down the list we could go, Republicans and Democrats who are pro-abortion, if they do not repent of this sin and they receive in a state of separation from the grace of God, and not in a state of grace, that is the sin of sacrilege. So that's not a question. Everybody agrees on that point, and I think that needs to be shouted from the rooftop. But whether or not Pope Francis is against abortion or against gay so-called marriage, which of course is not marriage, that's just not a question. Pope Francis is on the record. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it's sometimes you hear things, the one way, and then somebody else will interpret it, a different way. But
well, you know what you do, Andrus? You set them straight, brother. You set them straight, and that's what I do. I go to what actually Pope Francis teaches in his magisterial documents and what he has stated publicly. Not this sort of, well, he let this guy over here do this, and he promoted this guy over here. Stick to, I'll tell you, brother, you have a whole lot of people in our Catholic culture today that would condemn Jesus 6 ways to Sunday. But you promoted Judas. He's stealing from the purse. He's a this or that, right? And you, look, stick to what Jesus teaches. Stick to what the Pope teaches. Popes are involved in all sorts of decision making and things go on. I got to tell you, I can look back and I used to say, Cy Kellett, what in the world are you doing, Pope St. John Paul the Great? Of course, he wasn't saint back then. Putting Walter Casper in charge of interfaith dialogue was like,
right.
Putting the wolves in with the roosters here. But what are you doing, right? Or, what was Pope Benedict doing, putting Archbishop Paglia on the Curia, and then Francis now with Paglia, who's crazy, and so you go, what are you doing? And you know what? I don't know, but you know what I say? The popes know what they're doing. They're smarter than I am, and they have their reasons for doing what they do. But what I love about Pope Francis, Pope Benedict, Pope St. John Paul the Great is when it comes down to the teaching of the church. Cy Kellett, and you have magisterial teachings, guess what you get? And that's what I stick to. I don't know what else I can do, Cy, except stick to the magisterial teachings of the church, and of course, the definitive perennial teachings of the church, like that homosexual acts are always and in every circumstance grave matter, gravely sinful. And you find that in the Catechism, section 2357. And of course, no pope has ever contradicted that. That's what we got to stick to. Homosexual marriage is not even a possibility. The blessing of homosexual marriages is not a possibility. The church has spoken on that matter. And so it doesn't matter if some cardinal says this or some bishop says this. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to proclaim this is the catechism. See, a cardinal doesn't have the authority to change the catechism of the Catholic Church. A cardinal or an individual bishop or Cy Kellett even, as powerful as he is,
and it is an awesome amount of power.
He does not have the power to change the perennial teaching of the church. And so that, Andres, I challenge you and all. That's what we stick to. We proclaim it, and you'll never lose.
Andres, thanks very, very much. Every single line full now. It's open forum, so I go off to Nipomo, California. Steve in Nipomo is next. Steve, go ahead with your question for Tim.
Hey, thank you, Cy.
Yes.
Tim, you pretty much nailed it on the head there. That was what I was going to ask you, and God bless you for your stance, pointing me back to what the Bible says and what the church teaches, instead of looking at what the news has done with that AP interview with the Pope.
Yes.
That was my problem as a Protestant wanting to come into the church. There's so much junk on the internet that have confused the heck out of me.
Yes.
I stopped watching the Dr. DMs and those kind of guys, because all they're doing is ripping me apart.
Yeah.
And
Amen.
I appreciate your honesty. You've been in my shoes as a non-Catholic, Tim. You understand. And I just want to, if it wasn't for you guys, I would have stopped even trying to be Catholic.
Yeah.
And I just thank you, and God bless you for what y'all do.
All right, brother.
Thank you,
God
Steve.
bless you, Steve. Great to hear from you.
The number's 888-318-7884. It's open forum.
I want to just dovetail on what Steve said, and God bless you, brother, for calling in. Si, you and I were talking about this. Deja vu all over again, as Yogi Berra would say. We did a couple of shows here earlier, recorded, what do we call focus, right?
Yeah.
But, I tell you, I guess I just look at things a little bit different than some folks. Maybe I'm crazy. But you know what? When things are heating up in the church like they are right now, I get excited. And you know why? Because this is the opportunity for the church to clarify for the entire world, and that's what we are in the midst of doing right now. As 1 Corinthians 11:19 says, heresies must come so that those who are approved may be manifest among you.
Right back with more Open Forum.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity. In the early church was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
The recent decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade was a monumental victory for the pro-life movement. But the fight is far from over. With our new booklet, Why We're Pro-Life, we have produced the perfect tool to prepare you to have peaceful and convincing conversations to shed light on the truth about human life from conception to natural death. Catholic Answers is printing millions of copies of this booklet, and we plan simply to give them away. You can help us in two ways. First, by generously supporting this project. 25 cents prints one book. $2,500 prints 10,000, and so on. Second, by helping us distribute the booklet through your parish, your school, or the pro-life ministry you work with. Catholic Answers is going to blanket the country with why we're pro-life, but only if you step up and help us. Thank you so much. For more information, visit whyweareprolife.com.
Hi, this is Janet Williams. You don't have to be a woman to enjoy Women of Grace tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern here on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Well, Timmy's not here today. He missed out on the groovy music. That's a little bit of groovy music for Tim. The number is 888-318-7884. A few lines open for Open Forum. Whether you're Catholic or not, you're welcome to call with your questions. 888-318-7884. And pretty much open any question you got about the Catholic faith. I'm going to go to Rochester, New York next. Andrew in Rochester, New York. I'm glad you're here. Andrew, go ahead with your question for Tim.
Glad to talk to you guys. Yeah, so I have a question about theology of the body. I've always liked the argument that parts of the body shouldn't be used against their function.
Right.
So things like masturbation or body mutilation would be improper action as a result.
Right.
However, I read an argument online against the position which I couldn't dismiss. If I remember it correctly, it went something like, well, if the purpose of the mouth is to eat, then chewing gum should be forbidden, since it thwarts the purpose of nutrition, just to enjoy taste.
Right.
How should I distinguish this from, say, contraception, if I've correctly assumed that chewing gum is okay?
Right. Yeah, it is a good question. I've heard this many times, and folks ask it absolutely seriously. But Andrew, I think the way you want to respond is that whenever we're talking about any moral action, that can ultimately be, traced back to one of the 5 natural inclinations, and this you're talking about is self-preservation that includes nutrition and hydration. This is serious stuff, and so we should not abuse that faculty, just like we shouldn't abuse the faculty of speech or sex or so forth. So the principle is sound that says you cannot abuse that faculty of eating, hydrating, and giving yourself the proper nutrition for survival. However, where the problem comes in is what is an abuse of that faculty? And chewing gum is not. And the reason is because chewing gum does no harm. There's nothing about chewing gum that's contrary to you being either hydrated or receiving nutrition, because there's always going to be a little bit of whatever is there, sugar or non-sugar or whatever it is. It would have to be something contrary to that faculty. For example, if you were to eat and then vomit, right? What do we call that? Bulimia?
Yeah.
Right? Something like that, that is contradicting that faculty to the point that you are harming yourself. See, it's not so much of it's a false understanding of natural law that sees it in a sort of mechanistic way. But it's not a mechanistic. Natural law is not mechanistic because it sees the greater picture of what helps the person versus what harms the person. So you have to look at the nature of the faculty and is it being thwarted? There's nothing about chewing gum that does that.
Okay, so hypothetically,
yes,
if there was a kind of gum that didn't provide any nutrition,
no,
it was just tasteful.
Yeah, the only
would that be thwarting the faculty?
No, it would not, Andrew. The only way it could be is if you were to exclusively chew that gum that gives you no nutrition to the point where you harm the end of the act. What is the end of the act? To hydrate, or in this case, to give the person nutrition. So if all you did was chew gum that has no nutritional value to the point that you starve yourself to death, or starve yourself to the point where you do damage to your body, that is when we would say, yes, this is a sin, but not simply chewing the gum. So you have to look at the nature of the act, the end of the act, the purpose of the act, and is that purpose actually being thwarted? Like, take the sexual act, right? The union of one man, one woman, and procreation, right? If you perform an action that thwarts either one of those, and it has to thwart it, that reduces that act to the level of sin. So again, I would emphasize to whoever is asking this question that you have to go beyond simply saying you're chewing gum. You have to say, what's the end? What's the end of the action? Is it thwarting the faculty of eating? No, it's not. Unless, again, you take that to the point where, okay, you're not having meals, dude. You're just chewing this gum that has no nutritious value. Dude, you've lost 20 pounds. You look terrible. You're getting sick. Brother, you're committing sin here, okay? You're going to destroy yourself if you continue.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Excellent answer. Thank you for your time. I've been thinking on that for years. So
I got you, brother. All right, man. Thanks for the call.
And I don't remember the kid that was on the Willy Wonka movie that chewed the gum.
Oh, yes.
See, now that kid was out of control with the gum chewing.
Yeah.
What was his name? Which one was it Violet that chewed the gum?
Oh, yeah. She turned purple. Yeah. Was that the one?
Yeah.
And
I think
blew
so.
up? Yeah.
So I just wanted you to know there was a real world example because I believe that was a documentary, that movie. I'm not sure, but thanks,
Gotcha.
Andrew. Let's go to Green Bay, Wisconsin. Mike in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead, Mike, with your question for Tim.
Good evening, guys. Thank you for taking my call.
Yes.
Cy wanted to invite you and your co-host there to dinner. We've got Bishop David Ricken coming. I know you'd love to come to Green Bay in the middle of the winter.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, I'll be there in a minute. As a matter of fact, can we have somebody who can do the second hour, Darren? I got to get on a plane. I'm going to Green Bay.
I'll tell you what, though. I went to Green Bay, just about a year ago, and I got to go to Lambeau Field.
Oh, you did? I've never been there.
My life is now complete.
I guess so. You made the pilgrimage.
I made the pilgrimage.
The
That's
NFL
right.
Hajj.
Once in a lifetime, you have to go to Lambeau Field. A wonderful place there in Green Bay. But go ahead, brother. What's on your mind?
Well, my question is about the imprimatur.
Yes.
Where did it come from? Who instituted it? And in the modern day, is it required of certain kinds of books, for example, or movies or videos? If I go to Formed and watch a video, do all of those need an imprimatur, or are those kind of if I want to get it, I can request it. If I don't want it, not necessary.
Right, Mike, great question. And this is one of the good things, I think, because I actually am a fan of the imprimatur if it's done right. It was extremely helpful. It's one of the good things that came out of the Counter-Reformation. It started in the late 1500s into the 1600s with the advent of the Protestant rebellion because there was so much confusion. And remember, when we had Christendom, and before the Reformation, there was so much unity. It was ridiculous when it came to the faith, and not that, of course, you had heresies, and you had Berengarius, and you had the various Gnostic splits and that sort of thing. But, the faith was so unified that, the imprimatur was hardly necessary back in those years. But after the Reformation, it was just an explosion of confusion. And you look at today, with the level of theological confusion out there as a result of the so-called Reformation, it's absolutely horrid, and the confusion. So at any rate, it started late 1500s into the 1600s, and it comes, and it really, as I recall, it started in the English-speaking and European sort of realm there as a result of the Reformation, and really became popular among English speakers. I don't know why that is, but it was really, really powerful in the centuries that would follow in the English-speaking world. It even got exaggerated among we English speakers. You had to have an imprimatur on, like you said there, before you do anything. Is there an imprimatur on that before you have that taco, pal?
Right.
We did get a little bit crazy with it, but the principle is sound. Imprimatur simply means a permission. It's stating with the authority of a bishop that this book is okay. They've found nothing contrary to the faith. And then you had added the nihil obstat. There's nothing objectionable, and that's usually done by a bishop or a theologian, an expert that's kind of given the authority by the bishop to do it. Now, in the law as it stands now, the only thing that's really mandated are number one, Bibles. If you're going to have a translation of the Bible, the Code of Canon Law mandates that you have or get an imprimatur. And for obvious reasons, because Bibles and their translations are extremely important. And also catechetical materials. So if you're teaching, textbooks and such for Catholic schools and whatnot, those have to have imprimaturs. But imprimaturs are not required, like on our books here at Catholic Answers. If they're not being explicitly, designed for catechetics or obviously translating a Bible, it's not technically required, but it is encouraged. It's encouraged by the church, and it's a great thing. But the only thing I would say as an addendum to that is we did have exaggerations, and I think we've experienced that in our own lives here at Catholic Answers, where people are under the sort of wrong-headed notion that if it's a theology book, it has to have an imprimatur. If you guys don't have an imprimatur, I'm not going to buy the book. Well, that goes beyond the law of the church. The church does not require it to that extent. Does that help at all, brother?
Well, it does. I was watching, like I said, a video on Formed about the process of death, and I think it's a 4-part series. Right. Many priests on there and many different things being said, and I'm wondering, boy, is this definite? Is this someone's opinion? So
Right.
that's kind of what brought it up.
Sure. Imprimaturs are good. You know, it's a wonderful gift to the church, as I said. But I'll tell you what, my friend, all of us as Catholics need to know our faith. And I think it's imperative for us today, given the fact of what we've been talking about more than once here, Si, the level of confusion that we have today as a result of, we could go back to the Reformation, the Enlightenment, the rejection of God, the rejection of the Catholic Church, the confusion Protestantism was brought in. And today, the confusion even in Catholic culture. There has never been a more important time for you and I to be formed in our Catholic faith. We have a responsibility as Catholics. I always point to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, section 900, that says each and every one of us has a duty, that is a responsibility, as well as a right to evangelize, right? By virtue of our baptism and the sacraments of initiation we have received, we have a duty and a right given to us directly by Jesus Christ. Remember, you don't have to call your bishop on the phone and say, "Can I evangelize my neighbor?" Right? No, because you have been given your marching orders directly from Jesus Christ through your baptism and the sacraments to evangelize. And in order to do that, you have to know what you're talking about. And so there is also a responsibility incumbent on all of us as Catholics to know the faith, to study, as Timothy said, or St. Paul said to a young bishop he had ordained, St. Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:15, he said, "Study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman who need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." That's a responsibility not just for bishops and priests, folks. Have you heard? We're all called to holiness, and we're all called to evangelize. We are all called to know our faith. And the way you can do that, oh my goodness, guys and girls, we have one of the greatest gifts given to the church in the history of the church. It's called the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Just came out in 1997. Thank you, Pope St. John Paul the Great. You have a document right there. Now, of course, it's not the end-all, be-all, but my goodness, it's awesome.
Awful good.
It is awful good. Get one. Read it. And you also have wonderful tools at your at your fingertips here at Catholic.com, EWTN.com. You have the Augustine Institute. We have so many apostolates and ministries. We have awesome bishops all over this country in the United States. Let's just face it, folks. We have an incredible episcopacy in the United States. I mean, my goodness, we have so many rock-solid bishops all over this country, and you can go to websites galore and get so much. I tell you, Si, there is no excuse for us not knowing the faith today with all that we have available. So start right here. Catholic.com, check it out. We've got tens of thousands of pages of free information, not to mention that shop that you can go and buy Si Kellett's book, right? So anyway, just for all of us, I think, because when you ask these kinds of questions, we always have to get back to our own personal responsibility as well.
Thanks, Mike. Looking forward to the bratwurst and the
Amen,
sauerkraut and the liney. We'll take a quick break. Be right back with more Open Forum, Catholic Answers Live.
Hello, this is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Keep your dial tuned to Catholic Answers Live.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The destination for great Catholic audio programming is EWTN Podcast Central, featuring the best of EWTN radio, as well as faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates across the nation, all in one place, all free. If it's central to the faith, you can find it on EWTN Podcast Central. It's like podcast heaven. Visit EWTN.com/radio/podcasts today.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Tim Staples with us for this entire hour. Next hour, Jim Blackburn will be here. So in about 11 minutes, Tim is going to be shocked. Shocked!
No.
That we've come to the end of the hour. So I'm giving you your warning now. It is coming up. Let's go to Johan in Rochester, Minnesota. Johan, you there with us?
Yes.
All right, great. Go ahead with your question for Tim.
I would like to ask what the church stands against the death penalty.
Great.
And I just say this because I see a lot of focus on calling out politicians pro-abortion, which they should be.
Yes.
But I don't see the same strength for politicians who are pro-death penalty. For example, Texas governor, he has signed 56 executions, and he's seen as a great pro-life guy.
Yes.
I see there's a discrepancy. I don't know if you can guide me.
Yeah, fantastic question, man. And of course, the position of the Catholic Church is that the death penalty is objectively, or at least it can be objectively, a just punishment. That has to be understood first and foremost, as Genesis 9:6 says, the one who sheds blood, his blood must be shed. I could go down a litany of examples where Jesus says to Pilate in John 19, verse 11, when Pilate says, don't you know I have the authority to put you to death and to set you free? And Jesus says you would have no authority unless it be given to you from above. So Jesus himself acknowledges the death penalty can be a just punishment. St. Paul in Romans chapter 13 through 1 through 4, and we could go on and on. So the death penalty is, objectively speaking, not intrinsically evil. The church has never taught that. Argue the church can never teach that. That would be crazy. But and here's the key, my friend. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you always should. And I think King David's probably happy about that, or he certainly was, because remember, King David committed murder and adultery, and he was not put to death, right? You know, Cain, who killed his brother, remember, God not only said, when Cain was afraid, they're going to kill me, the people are going to kill me, he said, I will put a mark on you, and anybody who touches you will answer to me. So God says no, even in the context of the Old Testament, at times, to a penalty that is clearly, or at least it can be just. So I emphasize that point. The church has always upheld it as a possibly just punishment. However, the popes have been moving, of course, Pope St. John Paul the Great, and it really goes back before John Paul the Great, but Pope John Paul really made some decisive moves, like, changing the catechism there, and what is that, section 2267, I want to say. Am I right? It's right around in there somewhere. And moving in the direction of eliminating the death penalty, which, of course, Pope Francis took kind of the next logical step, even though John Paul pretty much eliminated it. Francis finally said, basically, given our situation today, and the Catechism lays out some points, it's really well done, that Pope Francis placed in there, given our development and our understanding, for example, the dignity of the human person, our ability to protect the common good with non-lethal means, given lots of other factors that are not even in the catechism. I mean, you look at the United States, the American bishops have been saying it for many, many years, that the death penalty is carried out so unjustly in the United States. If you're O.J. Simpson, if you're rich, you ain't going to die. The people who die are poor people who don't have the dream team. I mean, it's so absolutely unjust the way it has been implemented. And we could go on and on about that. What basically the church is saying is that it ought not to be used in this day and age. And even though the catechism leaves a little bit of wiggle room there, it's generally understood by bishops everywhere that the death penalty ought not to be employed. Now, as far as your point, though, about, say, Governor Abbott or any others who are still pro-death penalty, even though they're Catholic, well, the church really is taking a slow sort of slow motion on this point, because the death penalty has been upheld and practiced for so many centuries in the church. That is not in the church, but permitted by the church, and said that, nations can employ it and so forth, that it's not like overnight the church is going to come down like a ton of bricks on folks who are struggling with this issue. And many are. I know I struggled with it myself. I personally have formed my conscience in accordance with the teaching of the Catechism, Pope Francis, John Paul, and such. And I can honestly say, I do not believe the death penalty should be carried out today. Man, I was raised a Southern Baptist. I used to say, kill them all, let God sort them out. And when I was Assemblies of God, are you kidding me? Right? And one can understand, again, given what I said earlier, why people hold to that position. But you also have to understand where the church is coming from. There are very, very strong reasons why we ought not to employ it in this day and age. But please, folks, be merciful toward those who are still struggling with this, because the church is merciful with them as well.
Johan, I'm going to leave it right there, because I want to try to get another call on with Tim before we have to go. Because whenever I have a Mary question, I try to get it on with Tim. Rob in Grand Rapids, Michigan, go ahead with your question for Tim.
Yeah, thank you. And I always found the Hail Mary, full of grace enunciation being quite compelling for Mary being without sin, but
yes,
doing a little bit of research on it, looking at the first Catholic Bible I look at, it says favored one, or highly favored one, excuse me.
Yeah.
And my understanding is it's something that can be taken out of the Greek, but it's not the best.
No, you're exactly
that could have been taken out of it.
You're exactly right. And Rob, what I'd like to do is send you a copy of my book. It's called Behold Your Mother, A Biblical and Historical Defense of the Marian Doctrines. And I go into a lot of detail on this. Would you like to get a free copy?
Certainly.
All right. We'll send it out to you. Give your address to the call screener. But let me just say this. You are entirely correct. In fact, Pope St. John Paul the Great, exercising his own authority, motu proprio, said that is going to be changed, because, as you may know, ISOL, the International Commission for English Translation of the Liturgy, were dragging their feet. John Paul had been screaming at them for a long time to give us a better translation of the liturgy and such, and they weren't. And so John Paul mandated the change of Luke 1:28, because the NAB did not have it translated as Hail Full of Grace. He mandated it. And that's why in the liturgy, when you go to Mass, you hear Hail Full of Grace. Now, by the way, it doesn't say Hail Mary Full of Grace, and that's important. It's actually Kyrie ke charitomene, which means Hail Full of Grace. And you are right. The perfect passive participle there, being used as a name, is very significant. Pope St. John Paul the Great, in his great encyclical letter on Mary, the Mother of God, it's called Mother of the Redeemer, makes this very point. When you have that word Kyrie, normally what follows is like what you see in John 19:3. When the Roman soldiers were tormenting Jesus, and they were plating the crown of thorn on his head and hitting him in the head with reeds, and they said, "Hail, what? King of the Jews?" Because normally after that greeting of Hail, Kyrie, comes a name, right? Well, here it's Hail, so you think Mary is going to be the next word, but it's not. Pope St. John Paul the Great says, the angel actually gives Mary a new name, or a new title. Not so much a name to be called, but a name that reveals something about the character and calling of Mary. Kind of like Jesus' many names in Isaiah 7:14, Emmanuel, which means God with us, or the many names he's given in Isaiah 9:6. Well, that name becomes extremely important, because it means full of grace, which basically means she ain't got no sin. And because it's a name, full of grace, being incompatible with sin, the name indicates it's a permanent state, right? Because names indicate something about the character and calling of the one named. And I wish I had more time. I don't, brother, but I'll tell you what, we're going to send you out that book, and you're going to get a whole lot more.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks very much. Thank you, Tim.
God bless you, brother. Thanks for having me.
You too. It was fun talking with you and with those pre-records, we'll play in the coming weeks and months over at Catholic Answers Focus. People should check out Focus. Just go to CatholicAnswersFocus.com. Coming up next, more open forum. So if you're on the line, stay on the line. If you haven't dialed yet, 888-31-TRUTH. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. As promised, we continue with Open Forum this hour, and as promised, Jim Blackburn is our guest. Jim, a long-time member of the Catholic Answers family here. He handled the Catholic Answers forums for a long time. He's probably answered more apologetics questions than Justin Martyr. I tried to think of a good apologist. And now he's the proprietor of CatholicQuestions.com, which we will ask him about momentarily. If you have a question for Jim, any question at all about the Catholic faith, whether you're Catholic or not, 888-318-7884. Jim Blackburn, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Cy. It's always a pleasure to be here.
All right, tell us a little bit about CatholicQuestions.com before we go to answer some questions.
Well, Catholic Questions exists to help people who want to ask questions, but they don't want to ask them on the air, and they can't get in for some reason or another. People who have questions about the Catholic faith can give us a call or email us or text us or go to our website. We've got every opportunity to ask a question, and we have apologists who respond to every question, usually within a day or two.
But I mean, we're so big, we have an app here at Catholic Answers. So yeah. I really feel like you need to get an app, Jim.
We do. You know that, Simon.
Oh, you have an app
We do
too?
have an app as well. It's available on the Google Play Store. It's available on the Apple App Store. So for iPhones and Androids and iPads and tablets, you can download our app and ask the question directly from the app. We do require an email address because we do reply by email. But the app's an easy way to get that question over to us.
Get it. Boy, that's a lot of things. You can call, you can send a letter, you can text, you can go to the website, you can use the app. Get your questions answered, CatholicQuestions.com. Or for the next hour, you can just call here and talk to Jim Blackburn personally. 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Let me tell you how many lines are open. Oh, just one line open. We better get to the phones. You ready to go to the phones, Jim?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, let's go to Brian in Fort Wayne, Indiana, listening on Redeemer Radio. Brian, thank you for being here. Go ahead with your question for Jim Blackburn.
Thank you. So in the last hour, Tim was extolling the virtues of the Catechism, and I just happened to be looking through the Catechism at that time, and 991, 992 talks about the resurrection of the body, and 1035 talks about the existence of hell. So my question is, does the Church have a teaching about the resurrection of the bodies of the damned? I know the Church doesn't say that anyone in particular, I mean, it teaches the existence of hell, but doesn't say anyone particular is there. But what happens to the bodies of the damned? Are they resurrected also?
Yes, and in fact, you're right in the right section of the Catechism there. Paragraph 998 asks the question, who will rise? And the Catechism answers that question, all the dead will rise, those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of judgment. So the bodily resurrection is something that everyone will experience. And of course, the resurrection of the righteous, those who have done good, will be a resurrection to a glorified body, such as Christ's body. Gives us an example of what we might experience in that sense. The resurrection of the damned will be certainly a body that will live eternally, but of course the damned will be separated from God eternally with their bodies. But yes, in answer to your question, the Church does teach that the bodies of the damned will rise as well.
Okay. I guess I should have read a few sections ahead and would have seen that myself.
No problem.
But you won't experience it yourself, though, Brian. You'll be with the elect. At least I feel very hopeful about that, Brian.
Yeah, I'm hoping myself. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Let's go to Ale in Clifton Park, New York, watching on YouTube. Ale, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Jim Blackburn.
My question is with regards to the Nicolaitans and their leader, Nicolaus, what actual heresy he was promulgating, and is this the reason why he's listed last in the list of deacons in Acts?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've studied that heresy. I believe, actually, Cy, do you know off the top of your head, do you remember what that heresy was? Nicolaism, essentially?
No, I do not remember. I don't know. I do not. Nicolaism, I don't remember. No. Okay, well, we're going to leave it there. I guess neither of us remembers.
I'm sorry.
It was very, very ancient because I know it's mentioned in the Bible, but I don't.
It is mentioned in the New Testament.
Yeah.
It is related to Gnosticism. Gnosticism, of course, taught the matter is bad and only the spirit is good, and so human beings are essentially bad. And this was the Gnostic heresy was something that was very prevalent in the early centuries of the church, and it's something that we do see discussed in the New Testament. Paul addresses it. It's mentioned in the Book of Revelation. The specific teaching of the Nicolaitans, I can't off the top of my head tell you. I'd need to look that up. And I'll tell you what, if you'd like to, Ale, send me an email or however, use our app at Catholic Questions or go to CatholicQuestions.com. I will look up the specific version of Gnosticism or what it is about Gnosticism that the Nicolaitans were teaching and try to get that over to you off the air. Broadly speaking, it was a Gnostic heresy. Specifically, I don't remember. It's something that I studied many years ago, and you caught me off guard on that one.
Okay, that's great. And again, I'm assuming him being listed last, as far as the deacons, that was on purpose. I mean, it seems like typically, like if you're last on the list,
that you're in trouble.
Like with Judas is listed last.
But I think that's speculation. I don't think it actually says that in the Bible. I do remember a few things about this, and I know that the whatever the heresy of the Nicolaitans is, it is mentioned twice in the Bible. But I don't. I think it would be speculation to say that that's why his name came last. But it may be a true speculation, but I don't know. Jim?
Yeah, I agree with both of you on that.
Okay, Ale. I don't know. I feel like we should give Ale a book or something. Like he calls up and we say, I don't know. I feel like you get a book for that. What should we give him? 20 answers on prayer. He can pray for us. We'll give him 20 answers.
How about, since he's asking about the early church, 20 answers to the early church. That's one that I wrote. So if you care about that.
I do. Of course. What do you mean if I care about that, Jim Blackburn? Of course I do. I just was stumped. I couldn't think of what to give him. So, yeah, 20 answers on the early church. That's very good. 20 answers the early church.
I know in the early church I mentioned Gnosticism. I don't believe I mention the individual, I don't go into more detail about Gnosticism. That's something that I love it when we get a question that I can't answer off the top of my head, because I then can research it and find out more about it.
Yeah.
I've got volumes on the early heresies of the early church, and given more time, I can look that up. And Ale, I'd love to get back to you off the air on that one.
And enjoy your book, Ale. We'll take a quick break. We'll regroup. And we'll be back with more questions. Oh, there are some lines open, so you can call if you have a question about the Catholic faith. We'll know the answer to your question, 888-318-7884.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Do you have a question but prefer to ask it privately? Catholic Questions can help. Go to CatholicQuestions.com to ask your question online, email us, drop us a letter, or give us a call. Longtime Catholic Answers Live apologist and author Jim Blackburn or another Catholic Questions apologist will be happy to assist you. Catholic Questions proudly supports Catholic Answers Live, so visit us at CatholicQuestions.com today. That's CatholicQuestions.com.
He was a doctor of the Church and one of the most famous saints of all time.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Augustine is honored for his immense contributions to theology, but he balanced his genius with humility. He once declared it was pride that changed angels into devils, it is humility that makes men as angels. He died in 461.
To find out more, visit EWTN.com and click on Catholicism.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest is Jim Blackburn. It's open forum. Your calls are welcome. 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. Going to George in Iowa now, watching on YouTube. George, welcome. Go ahead with your question.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi,
George. Question. Do you think it's that there's anything stopping God from being able to create humans, or some humans with, a man with the brain of a woman, a woman's brain or a feminine brain, or however you want to put it? If we grant that men's and women's brains are different, could God, form a man who has a different brain than what we expect, and vice versa? Woman's brain in a man's body, and that's it.
Okay, well, I would clarify. I would say, first of all, to say that God could create a man's body with a woman's brain is a logical contradiction. It is the body that tells us, and the genes, the chromosomes that tell us whether a person is male or female. I mean, we can determine that, and that's going to be true of the tissue of the brain as well. But that said, could a person have more what we would consider feminine traits? A man have what we would consider more feminine traits? And sure, of course, there is when we define what it is that makes a man or a woman, it's not whether you like pink or blue. It's what you physically are, what you really are, and that's something that everyone is created male or female. Every human being is male or female, and every male has a male brain by virtue of the fact that he is a male. His brain is male, or it's a male's brain, I should say. And every female, her brain is a female brain in the sense that she's a female and she has a brain, so it's a female's brain. There's not such a thing as a male with a female brain, or a male or a female with a male brain. That's again, it's a logical contradiction. It's like a square circle or a rectangular triangle. We don't have. There's just not that possibility.
Oh, okay. So you are going on record and saying that there is no difference between the minds of men and women.
Well, I didn't say that.
They're the same. Oh, okay.
I didn't say that either.
All right.
I didn't say that.
I'm just working with what I've heard from
okay. What I said is that a male is his brain, by virtue of is that a male's brain or a female's brain? That's going to be a male's brain. That male brain, he might, through conditioning, through hormones, through growth, through all kinds of factors, develop what we would, as a culture or as a society, consider to be feminine traits. He might not have as much facial hair. He might prefer pink to blue. These types of things. But he's not. But he's still. It's a male brain, and he is a male. The body is the body as a whole, and the brain is part of the body. If the body is male, the brain is a male's brain, and vice versa. Now, that doesn't mean men and women aren't different. Certainly we're physically different, and because of hormones and cultural, outside factors, women develop differently than males do, and so we're going to see a difference between males and females, not just the obvious physical difference, but in traits, and that's normal. That's part of the human condition. It's part of human nature. But that's not to say that because a male has what we culturally identify as say feminine traits, that he's got a female brain. That's, like I said, a contradiction, Josh.
Okay. So, but the thing about pink, that's kind of funny because that was culturally different 100 years ago. Pink was considered masculine, blue was considered feminine. I'm not sure that's a good example of differences in gender roles. But so if it's chromosomes and organs, what if someone's organs are different from the chromosomes you'd expect them to have?
What if there's a Sure, Josh, and sometimes we do know that can happen. It's extremely rare, but that a person's body, say a male's body, can develop some traits, some physical traits of the female body. There are various ways this can happen. Sometimes there is say there was another twin in the womb, a female twin in the womb, and some of that twin's body was absorbed by the male, and he might show genitalia from both male and female. Most of the time, it can be figured out just from the chromosomes. Even in very rare cases, even the chromosomes don't tell us whether this is a male or a female, and that is the truth of the matter for that person, is a male or is a female. Even if his body has not developed 100% correctly, that doesn't somehow make him what he's not. It doesn't make him female. There are all sorts of physical abnormalities and deformities that can come into play. And when it happens to the genitalia, that doesn't then all of a sudden make a person a different sex than what he truly is. It's a tragedy, I suppose. It's an abnormality, but we should recognize that for what it is, and he should recognize that he is male, and he should live as a male can. Now, oftentimes, a person with the say traits of both male and female genitalia, one set of organs functions well, and the other one does not. That sometimes can help determine whether this is a male or female. Sometimes neither will work, and it can be more difficult. But those are very exceptional, rare cases that it's possible we might not be able to figure out whether a person is male or female, but I'm not aware of that actually being the case. With the state of technology and medicine and science today, I believe in every case that we can ultimately determine whether a person is male or female, and that means that regardless of what his body looks like, regardless of how he acts, regardless of his personality, he's either male or he's female, and that should be a truth that we all recognize and accept, and then move on with it. It's we want to embrace the truth in these matters, not desires. Say, if a person wants to be something that he's not, that's then we're getting into a mental problem. We need to accept the reality of the situation, and as I say, well, in the vast majority of the cases, it's very easy to determine whether someone is male or female. In the rare cases where it's not immediately apparent to the visual inspection, blood tests and other medical and scientific tests can help us to determine that, so that we can move forward in a truthful way, for this person to deal with his life in a truthful way, and for others to deal with him truthfully as well. So hope that helps, Josh.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you very, very much. Oh, no, that was, I'm sorry, that was George. I apologize. That was George. Oh, we're going to Josh now. Josh in Nebraska is next. Thank you, George, for the call and for the question. It's open forum. Jim Blackburn is our guest. The number is 888-31-TRUTH. And Josh in Nebraska, thank you for your patience. Go ahead with your question for Jim Blackburn.
Hi, Josh.
Hey, how are you guys doing? I hope that you're both well and know of my prayers for your guys' ministries. I appreciate all the things that you guys do.
Thank you, Josh.
For all of us Catholics. So I have a little bit of a conundrum. So all of my family was raised baptized Catholic, etc. And so one of my cousins is same-sex attracted, for what it's worth, and is currently in a relationship. And a couple of my other cousins are getting married, and they are getting married outside of the church. And so we were talking about how it's, there's questions on whether or not to, sort of attend their union since they're technically invalid, getting married outside of the church. And my brother said, well, isn't it kind of interesting that, we can go to those invalid marriages, but, theoretically we can't go to, if our cousin were to get engaged / married, we couldn't go to that wedding because, they're same-sex attracted. And I thought, well, that is interesting, but and so I was wondering, is there any reason that you can't go to? I mean, I know, that you don't want to create scandal, obviously, and you don't want to show approval for the person who is same-sex attracted. But could you just clear that up for me? What is the actual hard and fast rule for that, and what is your sort of take on Catholics attending same-sex attracted or homosexual weddings?
Okay, thanks, Josh.
Yeah, and this is something that I will. Let me first refer you to a magazine, a couple of articles I wrote for Catholic Answers magazine. Actually, it was the Catholic Answers blog back at the time. But if you go to Catholic.com and type in, should I attend the wedding or not? Should I attend the wedding or not? There's my first post on it, and then I have a follow-up to that. That, in a nutshell, is going to tell you what I would offer to you in helping to make a decision like this. And that is, if the church is going to recognize the marriage, then I say, feel free to go, enjoy it, go to the reception, take a gift, participate, be in the wedding. If the church is going to recognize the marriage as valid, then I supporting that. If the church is not going to recognize the marriage as valid, then I say I would not support that. I would not attend the wedding. I would not attend the reception. I would not buy a gift. I would work other ways.
All right, well, he froze on us. Jim froze on us, so we'll get him back. But I think Josh, that you get the idea of where he was going. Was that clear to you, Josh?
Yeah, and one of the things that I thought was very interesting is that I spoke to a moral theologian here who is a deacon, Omar Gutierrez. You might have heard of him before, and he kind of said, if it's a wedding between, or a civil ceremony between a man and a woman, you have to think about whether or not you want to sort of distance yourself from that relationship, like as a family member. And so that was what I was struggling with as well, is just like how you sort of navigate those waters of
without creating a distance.
Do I go? Do I not go?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Jim, did you want to follow up on that? Because I think we got the bulk of what you were saying before, Jim.
Okay, yeah. The follow-up I would have on that is that when it comes to same-sex so-called weddings, marriages, that to me is a very easy one, because the church never, under any circumstances, recognizes same-sex marriage. It's not something that really exists. The only people who are capable of marrying are a man and a woman. Two men cannot. They're not capable of marrying each other. Two women are not. So those are pretty easy because you know that the church is never going to be an approval of that, is never going to recognize that marriage as valid. Even if the civil government does, the church does not. When it comes to other weddings, between a man and a woman, then you need to sometimes dig a little deeper. Like, for example, if you know one is Catholic and one is not, or they're both Catholic and they're not getting married in the Catholic Church, that can open up some. If you know one's been married before, or they've both been married before and they're divorced and now they're attempting marriage, that throws a wrench into the situation that you might want to ask some questions about. And I bring some of these things up in my articles. So please do go to Catholic.com and look those up. Should I attend the wedding or not?
Josh, thanks very, very much. You can probably hear the music. That means we got to take a break. Several more folks on the call, but a couple lines open if you want to call with your question, 888-318-7884. Catholic Answers Live is 25 years old. That's a quarter century helping people come into deeper communion with the Catholic faith. As we move into our second quarter century, please help us reach thousands more by becoming a Society 315 monthly donor. Right now, when you join Society 315 at a monthly giving level of $25 or more, we've added some extra perks to the other great benefits we already offer members. Go to GiveCatholic.com and choose the monthly option to start your donation.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
The recent decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade was a monumental victory for the pro-life movement. But the fight is far from over. With our new booklet, Why We're Pro-Life, we have produced the perfect tool to prepare you to have peaceful and convincing conversations to shed light on the truth about human life from conception to natural death. Catholic Answers is printing millions of copies of this booklet, and we plan simply to give them away. You can help us in two ways. First, by generously supporting this project. 25 cents prints one book. $2,500 prints 10,000, and so on. Second, by helping us distribute the booklet through your parish, your school, or the pro-life ministry you work with. Catholic Answers is going to blanket the country with Why We're Pro-Life, but only if you step up and help us. Thank you so much. For more information, visit whyweareprolife.com.
Hi, this is Janet Williams. You don't have to be a woman to enjoy Women of Grace tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern here on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
A little bit of groovy music on a Thursday afternoon. Jim Blackburn is our guest. Your calls are welcome. 888-318-7884. You got a question about the Catholic faith? You got a question about belief in God? Something in the Bible you want to know about, as long as it's not Nicolaitans? Have you got something you want to know about the teachings of the church? A moral question? They're all welcome. 888-318-7884. I want to repeat again that Jim is the proprietor of. He's the founder of. And are you the president of? Have you given yourself a title as well?
President. Yeah, they have to have a president, so I'm the president.
Is that a legal thing? You got to have a president?
Well, we're incorporated. We are a nonprofit corporation, and corporations have presidents. So I am actually the president.
You couldn't make yourself procurator or king or something like that. You got to go with the American language of president.
My understanding is that there's got to be a president, and there's got to be a secretary and a treasurer. The secretary and treasurer can be the same person, but cannot be the president.
See, I don't know anything about that stuff.
We have.
But the thing we're talking about is CatholicQuestions.com. You can go to CatholicQuestions.com, where Jim is the founder and procurator. CatholicQuestions.com. But you can also just call Jim right now and talk with him. He is the king of CatholicQuestions.com. 888-318-7884. The provost of CatholicQuestions.com is our guest, Jim Blackburn. We're going to Columbus, Ohio. Doug in Columbus, Ohio, listening on St. Gabriel Catholic Radio. Doug, you are on with the Emperor of CatholicQuestions.com. Go ahead with your question, please.
Yeah, just someone asked me, and I didn't know how to give a good answer on this, but Mary, being fully human, she was born without original sin. Would she ever have the temptation or the potential to sin?
Okay. Well, I think that really, ultimately, the question you're asking is would she have concupiscence? Concupiscence is an attraction to sin, and it is concupiscence, as the Church calls it, is the result of original sin, or it's one of the defects that in human nature that resulted from original sin. And since Mary was preserved from the stain of original sin, she did not have concupiscence. She did not have an attraction to sin. Now that's different than could she be tempted? I mean, even Jesus himself was led out to into the desert and tempted 3 times by Satan. Temptation could happen, but Mary would not be attracted to that. The temptation would not have worked with her in the sense that she had such an abundance of grace. When we say Mary is full of grace, as St. Luke tells us, we understand that grace to be an abundance of grace, that Mary, not only did she not sin, but Mary would not have sinned. There's, I don't think, any temptation that could have been great enough for Mary to have committed a sin. This is when you read the writings of the Church Fathers and such on this, they go into great detail about this. It's something very special about Mary. So to answer your question, Doug, no, Mary was not attracted to sin. She did not suffer from concupiscence. Could she have been tempted? Sure. Temptations, someone could try to tempt her, but she would not have fallen for that.
Does that make sense, Doug?
That's excellent. Thank you, guys. Thanks for your ministry.
Thank you, Doug, and thank you for your call. It's open forum. There's 2 lines open, 888-318-7884. We're going to Salina, Kansas now, listening on Divine Mercy Radio. David, go ahead with your question for Jim Blackburn.
Hi. Yes. How are you guys this evening?
Very well, thank you.
Doing well, David. Thanks.
Okay. Hey. Thank you. I'm interested in studying the Bible a little more with my Catholic faith, and I would really like to know if there is a Catholic. I'm interested in the prophetic books that the Protestants tend to leave out of the, your normal mainstream Bibles.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a couple Catholic Bibles. What I'm looking for is either a Bible or a book that focuses on the like the Book of Wisdom and, First and Second Maccabees, the prophetic books that the Catholic Church has. Is there any direction I could lead? Because I would like to study those instead of having it all grouped in, like with Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and all that. I'm really interested in just learning the prophetic books right now.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
Okay. Yes, David, we call those the deuterocanonical books. That's a fancy word that means second canon. The books, there are 7 of them and parts of 2 others that they're all in the Old Testament, they're not in the New Testament. And those 7 books, again, we call them the deuterocanonical books. There have been quite a bit of writing on those. I know Gary Michuda's book, Why Catholic Bibles Are Bigger. It is an excellent one that I would recommend to you. He, in that book, goes into the various different books of the Deuterocanonicals, and it explains a little history about them and why when they were included in the canon, and who doubted them, who didn't. But ultimately, those books were canonized in the late 4th century, along with the rest of the Bible as we have it in the Catholic Church today. But if you want to read specifically about those, then that's my first recommendation, why Catholic Bibles are bigger. In addition, any good Bible commentary is going to include commentary on those books, on the Deuterocanonical books, or any good Catholic commentary. So you might just look for a Catholic commentary and just make sure it has the full New or Old Testament in it. And those commentaries sometimes are just the best resources for getting into the history of the book, the authorship, the dating of the book, the audience, and even the canonization of the book. Those would be my two recommendations to you. Cy, any other recommendations for David?
No, I was just going to say, well, we can send him a free copy of Why Catholic Bibles Are Bigger, because we love Gary Machuda and we love that book, and we'd be happy to send it to him. Is that what you were looking for, David?
Yeah, something to put me in a direction like that, because what had happened was I was basically raised in the Catholic faith, but what had happened is I was raised back east in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the 80s, and some of the Catholic schools closed down, and we spent a year or two. We wound up going to a Missouri Synod Lutheran school because we couldn't find one that was a Catholic school that was close to us. And when I brought up the certain books of the Bible, like Maccabees, I was kind of razzed by the pastor's son because, you must be that kid that transferred from the Catholic school. And I'm like,
that was mean.
So that always,
man, those Lutherans. I'll tell you what.
It was a Missouri Synod Lutheran. It was a Missouri Synod Lutheran school. It was the pastor's.
Well, I think
this
will help you. So yeah, just hang on. And is Siobhan there? Siobhan's going to take your address, and we'll send you a copy of Why Catholic Bibles Are Bigger, the wonderful book by the wonderful Gary Machuda. And our guest this hour is the Knight Templar of CatholicQuestions.com. And that's Jim Blackburn. Your questions are welcome. 888-318-7884. Irving in Chicago, Illinois, watching on YouTube. You're next. Go ahead with your question for Jim.
Yes, hi. How are you guys?
Very well. Thank you, Irving.
Yeah, so my question was, they invited me and my wife to a pilgrimage in Ohio. And I looked into it, and I was looking into it, but I never heard of it because, I like looking into, apparitions and all that.
Okay.
So it was some lady named Maureen Sweeney Kyle from Holy Love.
Okay.
And I don't think this sounds right, So I wanted to know if you guys know more about it.
Okay, because you're trying to decide if you're going to go on this pilgrimage?
Because I kind of... Yeah, because... What happened?
You're trying to decide whether you want to go on this pilgrimage, or you already went?
Kind of, but right now I kind of don't want to because it doesn't sound right,
Okay.
I don't think the church approved it. This separation and all this.
Yeah, right. Okay. Jim?
Yeah, from what you've described, I don't recognize that to be an approved apparition or an approved that the local bishop has approved of anything of it. And if there's a pilgrimage to it, I would doubt that the pilgrimage is actually sanctioned by the local church. I would check into that. And if the church has not approved of it, then I would ask myself, why? Why go? Why participate in something so extrinsic to the faith that the church hasn't even approved of it? Why participate in that and involve myself in it? That's my thought. I would recommend that you at least contact whoever's leading the pilgrimage, but maybe take a step further and contact the local bishop or just call the chancery and ask, what do we know about this particular pilgrimage, and is this something that has been sanctioned by the church? Is it something that's approved? Should I attend this or not? And see what they have to say. But I would suggest that expect that if this is something that's popular enough to have pilgrimages, the local bishop is going to know about it, and he's probably going to be able to provide you some excellent information on it, some good advice about it.
I think your detector was detecting correctly there, Irving. But as Jim was saying, there are ways to get more information on that. Does that all make sense to you?
Yeah, when I looked into it too, it says ecumenical Catholic, something like that.
Yeah.
I never heard of this. Like,
well, the thing that will have happened is that the bishop of the place where this is alleged to have happened will have made a ruling on this, and so that's the main thing that you're going to want to find out about. But you can ask your diocese. Yeah, they'll be. I'm sure they'll be able to help you with that.
all right, thanks. Yeah, I was just making sure, Yeah, I was curious.
I think well, as Jim was saying, I think you were very wise to make sure, because there's all kinds of people that make all kinds of claims, but you want to stick with the ones that the church has said, either at the very least, we don't know. I mean, if the church has said no, then you want to stay away from it. But the best would be if the church says, yes, there's something supernatural here, and they've approved it.
Yeah, and oftentimes, especially as I mentioned, when there are pilgrimages, when it's grown in popularity enough that there are pilgrimages, the local bishop has usually said something about it. So contact the chancery for the local diocese and find out, what the diocese has had to say about it. If anything, if the diocese has not said anything about it, if the bishop's unaware of it, then to me, that would make me skeptical of it.
Yeah.
It would make me want to kind of shy away from it. On the other hand, if the bishop is considering it, if it's under consideration, if the bishop is actually approved of anything related to it, that would open the door for me to consider it.
Do you know
further.
which diocese it is in Ohio, Irving?
No, I actually live in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
So, they invited me to go over there, so I was more like, I kind of don't know much of it. Yeah. But yeah. Okay, well, yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
I'll do that.
Very good. Thank you, Irving. It was a great pleasure to talk with you. We got to take a break, however, so we will take this break and we'll be back with more Open Forum with Jim Blackburn. I can tell you right now, we got a couple calls on when we come back, but if you call now, I think we can get you in the line and get an answer for you, whatever your question is about the Catholic faith, from Jim Blackburn, 888-318-7884.
Hang on, Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
My life is split between the search for the supernatural and the retelling of the credible and verifiable accounts of true instances of miracles. I think that people are inspired hearing these stories, and it bolsters people's faith to spend even just a few moments with the miraculous.
The Miracle Hunter with Michael O'Neill, Saturday afternoon, 1 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I was just looking up on the Cleveland Diocese's website, and it looks like there are two bishops of Cleveland who have said it is not approved, this apparition that Irving was just telling us about. So, Irving, if you want to check out, because it looks like it was in Cleveland, Ohio, Maureen Sweeney Kyle is the name of the alleged apparition who received this apparition, and if you look up on the Diocese of Cleveland website, Irving, I think you'll find the answers you're looking for. 888-318-7884, the number. Oh, Jim, go ahead.
I just want to mention, I did look up the Nicolaitans. That was, I think, from the first call.
Yeah.
There is a very brief Catholic Encyclopedia article on them, and the first thing it says is, although it's a sect mentioned in the Book of Revelation, the character and existence of which there is little certainty. So apparently we know very little about. Maybe that's why.
Maybe that's why we know very little, you and me.
Yeah, it does mention that Clement of Alexandria exonerates, Nicholas, and attributes the doctrine of promiscuity, which is claimed to have derived from him, to a malicious distortion of words and harmless in themselves. So apparently it's been claimed that he was had this doctrine of promiscuity, and Clement of Alexandria apparently exonerates him of that. But the sect was very short-lived. I guess we really know about it primarily from the Book of Revelation, but then, of course, some of the church fathers wrote about it. So I don't feel as bad, but I wish I had known that much when the caller was on the air with us.
Yep. But it's good to know now, and maybe that caller was listening. All right, we're answering. We're taking care of business. We're working our way through these. And while you were talking, I was listening to you, but I was also reading the stuff from the Diocese of Cleveland, and I think Irving should just stay away from. I'm more convinced now, having read both of the documents posted there, that he should probably just stay away from there. Let's go to Ames, Iowa. Drew in Ames, Iowa, listening on to EWTN Channel 130 on Sirius XM satellite radio. Drew, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jim Blackburn.
Yes, thank you, guys. My question revolves around part of the Liturgy of the Eucharist. When the priest says, "Blessed are those called to the supper of the Lamb," I know that references a chapter in the book of Revelation. I'm wondering if you could tell me more about that and why we are called to that supper.
Okay, yeah, we do see that in Revelation 19. The supper of the Lamb, we kind of see in the Bible itself this wedding feast, this the supper of the Lamb being the Eucharist, which we experience on earth, but in heaven being the banquet, really the wedding feast of the church, united with Christ, the bridegroom. And we follow this. We really kind of bookends the Bible. I wrote an article for Catholic Answers one time about marriage where I talk about this. How the Bible is kind of bookended, and then all throughout with this idea of marriage. And in the early chapters of Genesis, we see God created man, male and female, and they would essentially marry. They would come together and have children, promulgate the human species. And so we see marriage from the advent of humanity. Later on, as we go through the Old Testament, we see, of course, laws on marriage, but God himself uses an analogy of adultery, within marriage, to Israel's relationship with God himself. That even though it's idolatry when the Israelites reject God and to worship something else, God compares that to a husband or a wife leaving the other to engage in sinful behavior with someone else, adultery. And in the New Testament, this really comes to a head when we recognize that Jesus is the bridegroom of the church. And so this marriage analogy is continued on into the New Testament, and ultimately we see in the book of Revelation this supper of the Lamb, and even in the final chapter of Genesis, we see the final wedding banquet taking place. But that's it's in chapter 19 of the book of Revelation where you actually see the supper of the Lamb appear there, and it's in relation to ultimately the Eucharist as we experience it today, and will experience eternally in heaven as Jesus is the bridegroom, and we as the church are his bride.
Okay, Drew.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the call. Going down to New Mexico now. Alima in New Mexico, listening on EWTN. Alima, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jim Blackburn.
I'm sorry if I'm interrupting your conversation,
my speakerphone has to be off, and even though I have a new phone, it's not working too well. So pardon me, I'm sorry. I do have a question about the word special, and I was hoping that you could give me, the spiritual definition for that, or an example, or
of special.
Because I've been hearing it a lot, and I don't really know what it means. Maybe it's
Could you give us
a state of grace?
Could you give us a little context,
is that what you're referring to?
Alima, do you have like a sentence or something that it's been used in? Like a little context of where you heard the word special in reference to the spiritual life.
For example, just a few callers ago, you mentioned that our Virgin Mother Mary was not subjected to concubines. I think you said it was
concupiscence, yeah.
Because she was considered in a special state. I imagine it's a state of graces, but I don't know exactly what. I mean, a lot of people use it in different ways, that word. So, I don't want to try to give it my own definition or to assume that they're using it properly. I was just wondering about the spiritual sense of the word.
Okay, so let's just ask Jim, what did you mean when you referred to Mary as special in a spiritual sense?
Yeah, I actually don't remember the context of when I used that word, but
I'm going to say that probably, Alima, because Jim froze on us again, that when Jim said Mary was special in the spiritual sense, I think what he's going to do, he's going to come back and he's going to say having to do with that God preserved her from original sin. And so she... that's not a state that any of the rest of us share, only she and Jesus. But Jim, you got to we froze on you, Jim. I said you froze on us, but that's not the case. We froze on you. But so I was just trying to suggest that maybe what you meant by the word special in reference to Mary was her having been preserved from original sin.
Yes. What I was going to mention was, first of all, is to my knowledge, the church does not have a theological definition of the word special and use it in that particular way. Special is a word that we use in English to identify something as being unique, species, the species of something, something unique. And Mary certainly is unique in that she was full of grace. She was preserved from the stain of original sin, including concupiscence, by a special grace of God, a unique grace of God, a unique act of God. We know of this happening to no other person in the history of the world. So it was certainly special in that regard. I didn't mean to imply that that's a theological term that the church uses. I was using it in the English sense of the word.
Yeah.
So I hope that helps.
In the general sense of the word. Alima, thank you very, very much. Let's see if I can get another question in here before we have to go. Rita in Citrus Heights, California. If you can be quick, Rita, we can probably get you an answer, but we're coming up to the end.
I can be quick.
Okay.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Cy.
Hi, Rita.
Hi, Rita.
My reason for my call is I wanted to know if you could recommend some sort of book, some kind of guidance towards understanding gestures and postures during the Mass. I'm not always sure if I'm supposed to kind of mimic the priest or not. I'm trying to follow what others in my church are doing, but I sense that I'm not doing it right.
You're looking for some rubrics, some directions on what you're supposed to do. Okay.
The first thing I would recommend, Rita, is if your parish has missalettes, or if you have a copy of the missal, to look in there, because the instructions are given in there, not only the instructions for the priests, but the instructions for the laity to sit, stand, kneel, bow, all these kinds of things. If you don't have access to a missalette, or if you want to get more specific details of where these instructions come from, look up the document General Instruction of the Roman Missal. It's available online at the USCCB website. That's the United States Catholic Bishops website. general instruction of the Roman Missal, and it gives all those instructions for all our postures during the Mass.
Rita, thanks very much. I hope that was helpful to you. General Instruction of the Roman Missal. You can find that at usccb.org, or just type in General Instruction of the Roman Missal and you'll find it. Jim Blackburn has been our guest. One of the great things about Jim Blackburn, he's willing to answer your question about the Catholic faith, even when he's not on the air with us. You just got to go to CatholicQuestions.com. CatholicQuestions.com. Jim Blackburn, thanks for doing that and this.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. And Cy, as we showed today, if I don't know the answer to something, I'll find it.
He'll find it. We'll see you tomorrow, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.